let's see what this sounds like up high. I'm not going to spend much time talking about the E46 in general. I think you can look at millions of videos online, Wikipedia for all the stats. What I'm more interested in is how each car feels to drive, and how, you know, how they feel, obviously, like, you know, just from a personal point of view, how they look, and, you know, how they've aged and all that kind of stuff. And I think with the E46 M3, as it gets older, it starts to look better and better. When they first came out, you know, I think that, you know, it was a big step from the E36, particularly in performance. And at first, I'll be honest, I didn't think they looked that good. But, you know, now, as you see less of them, this one's obviously modified, so it does have a few changes. And the CSL particularly looks, I mean, for me personally, it's one of the best looking cars ever made. And this is almost there. We don't have the CSL front bumper, unfortunately, but we do have the you know, the boot lid, which makes a big difference. The diffuser at the back. This one's got a different exhaust on it, so slightly bigger tips. The original ones are a bit pea-shooter looking. You know, this one's got the CSL wheels, but I've actually got 4 rear wheels on this car, so the front end, the wheels at the front, they're 19 by 9.5, 265 tyres. And, you know, with the offset on those, it's made for the back end, obviously, so they just push the wheels right out to the arches, and it just looks perfect. Well, almost perfect. If we had the CSL front bumper, it'd be an absolute 10 out of 10. I've not had this car for a particularly long time, 6-7 months, and I wasn't planning on buying another expensive car. I'd just sold an R32 GTR that I'd spent 18 months stripping down and rebuilding, and decided after selling that I wasn't going to have another expensive car. But this popped up, and it was the interior really that sold it for me. Money no object, and just, you know, picking parts off the shelf. This interior with the carbon inserts, the you know, the half leather bucket seats, the cage at the back particularly, it gives it that, you know, post GT3 real Clubsport feel. You know, and for me that was what sold it. I wouldn't change a thing about the interior in this car. It is perfect, although possibly maybe just make it a tiny bit quieter. I did buy it with the intention of, you know, softening the car a wee touch and use it, you know, a bit, you know, much more of a road car than what it is just now, which is a bit, you know, track focused. So it's quite noisy and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to, you know, you could be able to use it for a long period of time without being sick of the noise. But that exhaust is just far too loud, and with no barrier from the boot area to the, you know, the cabin, it transfers far too much noise from the road to the inside of the car for my liking. In terms of modifications, well, I'll pan over a few areas of the car so you can see, but as I mentioned earlier, we've got the CSL boot lid, which is a genuine boot lid. They're hard to come by and they're extremely expensive. Same with the diffuser at the bottom as well. It just takes a bit of the softness and dated look away from the original 46 M3 and just gives it some curves and lines and, you know, a bit more interesting features to draw your eye to. We've got the Super Sprint Race lightweight exhaust at the back, which is again another expensive item, and, you know, if you're trying to chase every, you know, kilogram of weight saving, I'm sure it is, you know, a really appealing item to some. For me personally, the noise just is, it's not unbearable, but it's enough to put me off ever buying that exhaust for myself. I don't mind a bit of noise from a car in the exhaust, but it's got to be when you're actually going somewhere and higher up the range. When you're down low and just cruising, for me, you just want it as quiet as you possibly can. As I also mentioned earlier with the wheels, we've got the CSL wheels on this car, but we've got 4 rears. So we're 19 by 9.5 square all the way around, 265, 35 Michelin Pilot Sport tyres. You know, and in terms of look, you see them on nearly every modified E46 M3. But the reason for that is they're just by far the best looking wheels for the car. They're absolutely perfect. And having the square set, you know, the rears, the front, so the rears have got a good dish on them. The fronts as standard don't with the CSL wheels, but obviously having 4 rears, we do have the really dish set on the front, which look fantastic. Front end as well, we've obviously got the carbon lip down the bottom, which you either see the CSL style split lip or splitters, sorry, or the one continuous that we've got. I prefer this one if I'm honest, and if I had the CSL bumper I would probably stick with this one. Just looks a wee bit more aggressive and takes it away from being a, you know, just a complete CSL replica, you know, just give it a tiny bit of difference. Then we've got the headlight duct as well, just to feed that cold air straight into the CSL carbon airbox. Now that is a Carbonius item, so not genuine CSL, but you know, another expensive, hard to come by item that just, you know, if you're making a shopping list of parts for an E46 M3, that would be one right up the top of the list. Obviously you can see from the interior we've got a Gosling Racing half cage that also includes the internal subframe brace, which, if you know about these cars, they've obviously got a few issues that we'll go into in a minute, but the cage itself ties into the strut tops for the back end and bolts directly to the subframe through the floor. So just the rigidity at the back end of the car, I didn't notice it myself personally. This is my second E46 M3 and it felt fine in the first car. It felt, you know, sharp and, you know, responsive and all that stuff, but having driven this and just how quick the back end reacts and how sharp it changes direction, how quickly the back end can step out, you know, is something else you need to be wary of. Yeah, that makes a huge difference to the back of the car. On the topic of responsiveness and sharpness and all that kind of stuff, this car's been fully polybushed everywhere except for the diff mounts. The reason for that is you leave the diff mounts with a bit of play in them, it just helps ease the stress on the floor so you don't get any issues with one of the biggest issues on these cars that I'll go on to. But polybushed everywhere else just to really sharpen it up. We've also got eye-back anti-roll bars front and rear. Again, something else that just helps tie the car together and just make it really, really sharp on the front end particularly. Roads like this that we're on today is where you really notice it. I mean, this thing is not the fastest in a straight line. I've never driven anything like it through the corners. It is just planted. One of the next big upgrades we've got in this car is the brakes. I hope I've panned to some shot of the brakes by now because they are unbelievable in this car. They're massive for a start, and you know, I think they look fantastic. The setup is it's an AP Racing caliper, obviously, as you'll have seen in the shots. But the discs and pads are from, you know, not ex-British Touring, but they're used British Touring car discs and pads, so they've seen a round of action and then they're chucked out by the race teams. And there's a well-known guy on the Facebook pages and forums, Mark Buck, who obviously sells these on, and you know, you're about 80 quid for a set of pads I think the discs are about 130. So the big expense is obviously the calipers and the adapters, but they're just, you know, I've never had so much confidence in the brakes in a car before. These are unbelievable. The exhaust, obviously, I think I touched on at some point as well, that's obviously modified. Not the one I would pick, but I will try and capture the sound for you when it's really up high in the revs, because although it's horrible 60% of the rev range, right up the top end, I mean, it does sound like an old touring car from the 90s. It is incredible. That coupled with the CSL airbox, yeah, let's see what that sounds like up high. For all the positive points related to the E46 M3, it doesn't come without its own faults, some pretty hefty ones as well. But should those put you off ever considering to own one of these cars? So, faults for these cars is quite a topic of discussion on the forums and pages, and if you're looking to buy one, 100% you'll be looking up and you need to find out what to look out for with these. Rust with any old car now, be careful with rust, back arches particularly. So really, get a good look about underneath any car you're buying. Not the biggest fault, but the head gaskets on these are known to fail, as they can on any car. But I think the signs on these cars is not always clear. I don't think you get the usual white smoke or oily residue in the coolant. The only thing to really highlight it is a loss in performance. So be prepared, if it's not been done already, to keep an eye out for it, or negotiate having that done within the price of the car, or be prepared yourself to spend the money doing it for peace of mind. The Vanos is another big issue in these cars. I'm not sure if you can consider it a wear item or it is an inherent fault from design, but if it's not been done already, be prepared to factor that in to be repaired, replaced, however you want to go down that road. And the biggest fault of all, the rear axle carrier panel, or the boot floor, subframe. And over time, just through movement, forces, putting the foot down in the car, launching the car, anything you're doing, you're just constantly moving and twisting that panel. Spot welds start to fail. There's a bit of movement in the panel. You'll see it along the seams inside the arches that it's moved eventually. The floor cracks itself, and in the absolute worst case scenario, it will split from left to right across the car, and you'll just see the whole panel inside the boot moving. And at that point, you're looking at a whole new panel as opposed to repairing, which, even a repair job, you're talking £1,000 to £1,500 depending on where you go. You may get it cheaper, but it's not a job worth skimping on. This car has had the plates done, but we've also got the internal brace, in which you're seeing more cars with plates failing again. So if you are looking at a car or you've got a car with the plates welded in, 100% look at some sort of internal bracing just to share that load of stress through the car and tie it to other structural points, so that there's, it's not all acting in the boot floor and basically just wearing it out and wearing the spot welds, cracking and all that stuff. You don't want to be doing the same job twice, because it's not cheap. The rod bearings is another issue on these cars. Certainly with the E46 and the E92, E61, possibly the E39, rod bearings are almost a consumable. Once a car gets to 100,000 miles, if you've not done them, I would just do them. You should be factoring in getting that done immediately if it's not already been done. Negotiating that into the price of a car that you're selling, or be prepared to spend the money yourself. And along with the Vanos, the boot floor, head gasket, you should be budgeting at about £1,000 minimum for these jobs if you're not going to do them yourself. So there's £4,000 minimum. I would say closer to 5 for a decent job on those 4 big jobs. 3 of them being necessities, get them done before any signs of failure. Boot floor, Vanos, rod bearings. Head gasket, I'm not saying you should wait for it, but I wouldn't say it's something you say, right, I buy a car, I need to do the head gasket straight away. But if you are going to tackle the 4 of them, you're talking £5 grand. So any car that you're looking at buying and they haven't had any of that done, and it's a long-term car for you, it's £5,000 on top of the price of the car that you're going to have to lose fixing these things. And then you can relax and enjoy the car, which ultimately is the reason why you buy it. On this car, I paid a bit more than average price for this, but it's got every job done. All these upgrades we've spoke about. I don't think you can buy this car, which is a silver grey manual coupe, no sunroof, with the mods. I don't think you can put this package together for less than 35 grand. So how does this one feel to drive? Well, other than the noise letting the experience down a little, this really does feel like a special place to sit. The best thing to do now would be sell this and buy an E92 M3 and compare the two. I have to say, I think my next car is hopefully going to have a V8 in it, so that may just be the perfect switch. Has the E46 M3 stood the test of time? If you've got an opportunity to drive one, you should absolutely take it. If you've got an opportunity to buy one, I would think very carefully about the negatives that come with this car. They are costly, but there's no doubt that the E46 M3 is a special car.